Once the height didn't come and being an athlete wasn't in the cards, I never thought about, well, how do they sell the tickets? Why is there a Coca-Cola sign? How do they get on TV anyway? None of it. It was a little bit like the folks involved were a dog that had not only caught a car, they had caught a bus. They had these expansion rights, but okay, now we have them, what do we do? But then some things started to click with these soccer-specific stadiums and certain markets and supporter culture. You could see that this thing had real potential. I don't think we ignored what people were saying about our odds of success. But when we thought it through and we picked it apart, we weren't ignoring them. We just felt like we had very strong arguments for why that didn't apply. It was a reason and a vehicle to reconnect with something that I really, really loved when I was a kid.
Hi, I'm Chad Biagini, host of the Excellent Leadership Podcast and president of Nolan Partners, joined by my colleague and co-host Mark Mayleben, and our guest today, Larry Freedman, Chief Business Officer and co-president of the Los Angeles Football Club and BMO Stadium. Larry, wonderful to have you with us today. Thanks for joining.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Larry Freedman, co-president of Los Angeles Football Club. I know you well, but that doesn't mean everybody who listens knows you well. Give us the high level of your story. How did you get into your seat?
Wow. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And you both look very dapper.
We tried
We knew that you would
with
be.
the jackets
We knew that
and
you would
the hankies.
The hanky over here, I'm going to lift it up a little bit.
Bad miss on my part, no hanky.
Did you not get the email?
I didn't. I got the email, but I didn't read the email.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know me well
that's a
enough,
good
Chad.
chance.
Yes, I got the email, but did I read it? Or did I read it closely? I like to say...
It just said handkerchief in subject line. I would have thought that was sufficient enough.
Right. I like to say that how I got here is one of the great drunken walks of a career of all time. And we'll do it sort of the abridged version. As a kid in a family where nobody went to college, didn't know any lawyers, I just said, I'm going to law school, like at 8 years old. And
Not fully knowing what an attorney was.
no
at this
idea,
time.
other than a little bit on TV, right?
And that nobody likes them. I'm kidding. I have a lot of legal friends. I have a lot of legal friends. I'm kidding.
That wasn't quite as big a
That
thing.
was back in the day of
back
Matlock
then.
and
Even
good-
before. I'm older than that.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
My father-in-law's an attorney. I love
There you
attorneys.
go.
I'm just teasing. I'm going with the
It's
stereotype.
all good. It's all good. So my notion of being a professional athlete kind of goes by the wayside. My dad was 6'1", and I just kept waiting. Like the height is coming, and the height never came, which didn't help me as a point guard. I wanted to succeed Norm Van Leer as the starting point guard on the Bulls, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I was a goalkeeper in soccer. At a point,
Height's helpful.
height kind of makes a difference. So I went through with the law school thing, for lack of a better idea.
Did you enjoy law school?
I went to UCLA, so the faculty there and the dean at the time, I assume it's the same now, different dean, but they went out of their way to try and make sure that people had a life. And in my first year of law school, each professor in my section did a social event at their house, and it was mandatory.
Wow.
Like, I'll ding your grade if you don't come to my house, have a couple beers, eat some food. It was actually not a terrible experience. I think it is one of those things that people like to complain about after the fact.
Sure.
Because you guys didn't go, and if I make it seem like it was really difficult and I climbed
Yeah,
this
that's fair.
mountain,
Yeah.
like I'm going to impress you, or
Totally.
I make myself feel better at a minimum. But it was fine. It was fine. I found that practicing the law, I worked in a couple big firms, big firms, and it just was not for me.
What was your focus area at that time? What types of
Corporate
projects?
M&A. So
Great training.
yes, very good training.
Particular industries or no
No,
focus area?
it was whatever came through the door at the time. But then, good question, because at the second firm I was with, I did 90% of my work for a publicly traded, call it infrastructure system software company. and ended up jumping over the wall and becoming an in-house counsel there. Somewhere in there, they decided they didn't like my boss. So they got rid of my boss and gave me his job. And
You went in-house counsel for the client or in-house counsel for the law firm?
No, for the client.
For the client.
So I was working for a company called Platinum Technology, which was all kinds of infrastructure, software, database management, business intelligence.
That sounds more fun than LAFC, actually.
Oh, I'm not sure. I loved it. I loved it because I think of myself more as a logical, linear thinker.
Yeah.
And I was surrounded by people who were anything but, logical or linear. I always talked about our CEO as a guy who he's down the street, he's made a couple of lefts, a right, a U-turn, and that's just the way he thought. And I really enjoyed being in that kind of environment. People were so out of the box in their thinking, and it was so not me. And so it was a good, yin yang balance working with people like that. And as a public company, probably not too many of these guys running around as CEOs of public companies today, because life has changed and become a little more strict. But our guy, Andrew J. Flip Filipowski, used to say, all right, well, can we do this? And as the legal counsel, I would say, no, the rule says no. And instead of that being the end of the conversation, he would always ask, what do they do to me if I do it? And so, for a while, that was endearing. It's like, oh, well, that's interesting, because if it's a $50 fine, do it.
I have the same conversation with my kids about soccer plays.
Right.
They're like, that's against the rules. I say, it's not against the rules. You get a yellow card for that.
Right.
The discipline has been established.
There's a penalty.
It is acceptable.
Yes.
And here's the penalty.
Yeah. You just have to weigh the pro and the con. So do a bunch of technology things. I was on the launch team at Orbitz back in the day. We also did the same people. I was in the infrastructure software business. We sold that. And we started an incubator for internet B2B startups in 1999. So early days of the commercialization of the internet. Our bankers at the time at Credit Suisse First Boston, the late great Joe Josephson, said it best when he said, I don't know if this is a good idea. I know you're going to do it. So you're going to do business and we want to do business with you as your banker. But the minute rationality comes back into the market, you're done. And the bubble burst. And there we were. So at some point in there.
And were you doing law at that incubator? Or were you general operations? Or?
I had morphed. I was really lucky at Platinum Technology. My boss, the CFO, a guy by the name of Mike Cullinane, was not someone who thought, oh, you're a lawyer, go sit in the corner, I'll hand you documents, you'll review them, or I'll ask you to write them, or I'm going to come in and tell you I'm mad at somebody and we need to sue them. He would give me most anything because he knew that I was roughly organized, thorough, on time, right? So if I need it by next Thursday and there's 7 things to do, those 7 things will get done and they'll get done by next Thursday.
Right.
He also recognized that I was a decent writer. Sorry, for any of the former marketing people from Platinum Technology who are listening. He would come to me and say, you're a better writer than everybody in PR and marketing, so rewrite this. And so I got much broader exposure to the rest of the business, and we were very acquisitive. Over a period of time, we bought something like 70 other companies and or pieces of technology. And doing that, you end up going through due diligence and learning about what you're buying.
Ins and outs of every part of the business.
So, my role, whatever the titles were at various times, was much broader than just, hey, here's the lawyer guy.
Right.
And somewhere in there, we were living in Chicago or outside of Chicago, and my older son decided to come out here to go to film school at Chapman University. And I had always wanted to come back because I'd gone to UCLA. My wife was hesitant. And when our older son decided to come out and do film school, it was obvious he was never coming back. He was going to come out here and try and find his way and living out here versus living in the snow.
Right.
And so that opened the conversation to, well, maybe like if the right thing comes along. And I had started at a law firm out of school with a guy by the name of David Rohn, who had left to go to Disney, became a business development guy at Disney, then went to Fox Sports, then went to CAA with Howie Newchow and Mike Levine.
He's great.
And
Dave is really smart.
Started the sports network at Time Warner, which then became Spectrum, the Laker network, the Dodger network.
He's at Guggenheim right now, right?
It's at Guggenheim.
Yeah. Great
and
guy.
my friend said to my friend David, who he would call me every now and then from Disney and say, there's a job. If you want the job, I walk down the hall, I tell my boss the job is yours.
Wow.
And my family wasn't ready to make that move. When my kid came to go to school, I called him and said, if you ever hear of anything, just let me know. And he called me one day. I was on my way back from Vegas. And Howie Newchow at the time was the president of Mandalay Baseball, working with Goober. They had a quasi-lawyer business development guy who was leaving. And David was like, you're the guy. So I met Howie. We hit it off right away. And I moved out and went to work at Mandalay Baseball.
So no pursuit of working in sports. This happened to you.
This just happened.
Just through
I had
relationships.
never, and I tell this to groups of students all the time, whether it's Dr. Veely from Syracuse at the David Falk, sports program at Syracuse or the David Falk School. I tell them they're decades ahead of me because I had never once the height didn't come and being an athlete wasn't in the cards. I never thought about, well, how do they sell the tickets?
Right.
Why is there a Coca-Cola sign?
Mm-hmm.
And how do they get on TV anyway? None of it. Had no idea. Never crossed my mind. So David called me and said, one of my best buddies out here runs this minor league baseball company with some movie people. And it's like this really interesting, great business. You should talk to him. And that's how it happened.
Wow.
For as much as it took me by surprise, scared the shit out of me at the time, and it was a bummer, shortly after I got out here, Howie left to go to CAA and start that business. That was bad because I was no longer working with Howie. But that put me in the direct line of communication or the line of fire with Goober, which turned out to be a great thing.
Right.
And so we hit 2012-ish, and we had an equity partner in the baseball business. And Bill Luby at Seaport Capital looked at his watch
It's time.
and said, it's time. And he had a lot of fun in with the baseball business and actually took available extensions instead of divesting, because he had some other things left in a portfolio. And he's like, all right, if I still have this, I'm going to keep the baseball too. But we got to the point where we had to unload it. And we tried to unload it as one big thing and aggregated the value was in a range where people were like, wait a minute, if I'm going to spend that kind of money, I'm going to go buy an NHL team and we're going to play real games that matter for, real rings and real trophies, not this minor league, you got a player one day and the next day he's gone because the big league team called him up. And so we ended up breaking it into pieces. Peter and I sort of had bounced around the idea of trying to convince the Dodgers to do a joint venture with us in Oklahoma City with the AAA club, similar to what we had done with the New York Yankees in Staten Island and Scranton Wilkes-Barre on a couple of their clubs. And ultimately we did that. And at the same time, he had been saying to me for 18 months, 2 years, something like that, I might do a soccer thing. I might. I don't know if it's a good idea. I don't know if it's a bad idea. But I might do it, and if I do it, maybe there's something for you to do. Ultimately, he did it, and in October of 2014, the original squad, which was 3 people, one of the co-founders, the then president, and one other person showed up at our offices because Mandalay always had space, right? Because a casting director would take an office for a month, a producer would take an office for 6 months. People were in and out, so we always had a room. It just sort of naturally evolved because it was a little bit like the folks involved were a dog that had not only caught a car, they had caught a bus, right? They had these expansion rights, but okay, now we have them. What do we do? Right? What do we do next? And
so how did he pitch your role?
In true Goober fashion, he said, look, I'm an investor, I'm on the board, I'm the executive chairman, but I don't make the decisions, right? There's co-managing owners, they're going to make the decisions, so I can introduce you to people, and then it's up to you. I met Tom Penn and Henry Wynn and Alice Sheng, who were the first 3 people involved. You know, we talked about it, and where can you help? What do you want to do? What are you doing now? And you know, slowly over time, got involved, started out doing some more legal things. But at the same time, the group was small enough, and our old Mandalay baseball CFO got involved as well. You know, you're 5, 6 people, and it's like, all right, you know, the mayor of Long Beach called and said there's a site we should go look at out on the water, maybe put a stadium there. Okay, everybody get in a car. So, you know, we were all kind of involved in everything.
But what was exciting about that to you? Because you could have done probably a lot. Were you loyal to the owner? Did you like the people that you had just met? Like, so it was in the vision of MLS? Or?
It was a few things. An excellent question. I liked the people that I had met. They seemed great, and they seemed really committed to doing things and making a difference and doing things the right way, and saw that despite the fact that the Galaxy had been here for 20 years and the Chivas USA had been a failed experiment, that this was an incredible opportunity. In a market of this size, with this diversity, we could really make something special happen. And at the time, the league was turning 20 years old, and they had engaged a consulting firm to do a deep dive on like what has worked, why, where, what hasn't, you know, what are the findings, and what does it look like going forward? As a kid who grew up playing, and my family had season tickets to the old Chicago Sting in the North American Soccer League, where they played some games at Wrigley Field, some games at the old Comiskey Park, and some games at Soldier Field, in a league with Pele at the New York Cosmos and, you know, Gerd Mueller at the Florida Strikers, and Cruyff was here, I think. And, you know, it was the big thing, and then it was nothing.
Yeah.
And so I love the game, and there were all these fits and starts in this country where it's coming. Look at all the kids playing AYSO and club soccer. When they grow up, they're going to want to consume it. This is going to be big. And then it would fizzle. And so I read the materials that had been produced by this consulting firm. It seemed to me, one person's interpretation, it was an inflection point where, like, if this is ever going to work, this is it.
This is the moment.
Right?
Yeah.
This league went through some really tough times, and original owners like, you know, Phil Anschutz stepped up, and I don't know how many teams Phil owned at one time, but it was more than a couple to
5,
keep
6,
the
7,
league going,
like
and the crafts, and the hunts. But then some things started to click with these soccer-specific stadiums and certain markets and supporter culture. You could see that this thing had real potential, and Peter would always say to me, we know how to do this. Like, we know how to do this. It's about like butts and seats and fan experience and delivering for your partners and being a good citizen in a community. You cannot go into a community and just take money out of people's pockets and think that a year from now or 3 years from now or 7 years from now, that is a winning strategy.
Right, that you can do it
right?
again. Yeah.
You need to be giving back and active and doing good work in the community. And, from all of that came our uniting the world city through the world's game and bringing joy to people and being a force for good, the pillars of the club. And so for me, I like the people and I saw the opportunity. And I still remember standing in the hallway at the Mandalay Entertainment offices and saying to Tom Penn, we're going to sell every ticket. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's really, it's not that hard. It's 17 games, figure 22,000 people. That's, 350, 60 some odd thousand people. I'm like, we were selling 580,000 tickets a summer,
right,
to bad low A baseball in Dayton, Ohio.
Right. If you can,
we can do that. We can do this.
Yeah.
This seems 17 games. Yeah. Come on, we'll do it.
Yeah. Oh, minor league baseball is the ultimate grind.
Yeah.
To sell tickets.
And for me, it was like this Back to the Future thing. It was a reason and a vehicle to reconnect with something that I really, really loved when I was a kid. There you go. That was kind of how we ended up here.
You guys really wrote the playbook for launching of an expansion team in MLS, though, because before that, there wasn't a team that came on with remotely as much fanfare and excitement. Other great launches, I'm not being critical of anybody, but I agree that was an inflection point in the industry. And since then, a lot of new teams have come on board and have been celebrated like LAFC was, with sold out stadiums and passionate fan bases. What are some of the reasons for that?
It's interesting. I think that we've had in the league, we've got good ownership groups coming in. You look at and it's like this in every league, the makeup of the ownership is evolving.
Yeah.
You have people coming in, David Blitzer, our ownership group, Brandon Beck, Larry Berg, Bennett Rosenthal, Goober. You just see the success profile, the desire, and I think the motivations are more community driven than ever. You look at the family in St. Louis, the Enterprise Rent-A-Car folks who own St. Louis. They really have this is for the community approach.
Right.
If we make money, if we don't make money, we're doing this great thing. And we want to do this great thing. Yeah. And it is great. I think the markets have been really interesting because, 15 years ago, if I had said to you hey, you know what's really going to work? I'll tell you what's really going to work. Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee.
Right.
You would have laughed me out of the room. But those have been great markets with great buildings, great experiences, and they've really elevated the league. And St. Louis was a sleeper because, St. Louis was always a great soccer market.
Yeah, it's one of the original soccer markets, isn't it?
When I was a kid, great, super talented kids were coming from St. Louis and deep southern Illinois across the border from St. Louis. And so it's not a surprise that, they had 60,000 or whatever the number was, ticket deposits the minute they went on sale. I think the great thing about this league is that on the commercial side, everybody is open and willing to help each other. So we would not have had anywhere near the measure of success that we had if not for people like Jake Reed in Kansas City and Mike Golub in Portland and Chris Klein at the Galaxy, who was like, yeah, anytime you want to come down, give you tickets, walk you around, ask me anything. And everybody was like that. I said at the time to everybody, all of my compadres, first of all, thank you. And it's a lot easier to go 23rd than it is to go 3rd or 7th or 12th. Because everybody was so open and willing. Bart Wiley in Seattle at the time, whatever, any question, and we honestly, we wore out a path between LA and Kansas City. And there are things about our building, if you go to Kansas City, you're like, wait a minute, And then that gets paid forward because
right now people are coming to you.
Yeah.
saying,
So when Austin played their first game in 2021, which was socially distanced, at then Bank of California Stadium, now BMO Stadium, and the ownership group came out with their families, and before the game they were down on the field taking some pictures, and as they're walking off the field into our Lexus Field Club, little girl turns to her mom and looks up and says, "This looks exactly like the club at our stadium." And it's like, I wonder how that happened. Yeah. And like, look, if you're watching a Minnesota United game and you have the TV view of that side of their stadium, you're like, wait a minute, is that BMO Stadium? Right. And it's like, that's great.
Yeah.
Because we borrowed from others, people should borrow from us, and away we go.
And this was just organically owners and presidents and staff reaching out to each other. At the time, I would guess league office in New York didn't have as sophisticated of a like team marketing and business operations function.
We had a couple folks.
Yeah.
Declan Bolger, who is now with Kroenke Sports in Denver. I believe he is their CMO or some senior executive at the marketing level. And Dak was great, helped us and would introduce us. So it wasn't formal. It was a little bit more informal, but everybody was there to help because, dude, what's in it for LAFC if, San Diego comes out of the ground and plays next season and they fall on their face.
Sure.
Like, we want that stadium full. We want a supporter section that's rocking.
Yeah.
And it just elevates the league.
But Larry, even still, I think you're the only club, I believe I read somewhere, that has sold out every single game you've been in existence. So you're clearly doing something. You're learning from them, but you're taking and improving. What do you think has led to that success metric?
Well, at this point, I don't know that we're the only one.
Oh, you're not the only one ever?
Well, because St. Louis, some of the other new folks have definitely...
some of the newer ones that have just come online.
Yeah.
Okay, but
I think St. Louis could sell out twice every game.
Wow, really? That's a great venue.
Yeah,
I went to USA
beautiful.
versus, I think it was Trinidad and Tobago there. It's a great venue.
Look, we are working hard every day, and we are always trying to be better. And that is the way our various leaders, whether it's ticketing partnerships, in branding community, which is what we call marketing. We have a great CTO in Christian Lau, the tech boss.
He's awesome.
Who is out all day, every day, trying to figure out what new toy we need to improve the experience, remove friction for the consumers in our building, or make us better.
Is he globally traversing to do that as well, or mostly?
Sure.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. And look, every now and then you're like, oh my God, where's Christian now? It's kind of like, where's Waldo? But at a time like when we went through the pandemic and he is sitting on committees with clubs and venues from all over the world, you're like, this is why he does that.
Right.
Because you never know when it's going to really be of great value to us. And people like Ryan Bashara, who oversees revenue and data strategy for us, is always pushing with his team on the data and the analytics.
Sure.
And so I think what we do is we know that we're, it's the same situation in this market that led people to tell us we were crazy. Like, you are out of your mind. Like, this is never going to work. Number one, Galaxy's already here. So don't you think if people...
And they were killing it at the time.
They were...
Still are, but
they're still arguably the most successful club in the league's history.
Right.
Don't you think if there are soccer fans, football fans in the market, they'd be Galaxy fans?
Why would they move?
And by the way, proof of that is how poorly Chivas USA did.
Oh, exactly.
You guys are crazy. And we just felt like this is a big market, highly diverse, filled with football fans.
Yeah.
And what they had never been offered in this market was a true, authentic football club. And that's what we set out.
In the style of a Bundesliga or
in the style of FC Bayern, BVB, St. Pauli,
right?
With true supporter culture that comes out of the community, builds a community, and is intended to withstand the vagaries of winning and losing. Why? Because it's my club.
Mm-hmm.
It's my club.
Larry, you said a couple of things that I want to go back to. One is we're always wanting to get better. So I'm just putting a pin in that. So that we all remember that I want to talk about. We always want to get better. Thank you. Hold it up there for me. The other one that you were talking about along the way there was just this element that I find fascinating in leaders. Learning from others, getting counsel from others, because sometimes others see our blind spots and have a ton of wisdom.
Sure.
But then there's also this element of executive deviance, if you will, where it's like, no, everyone's telling me I'm wrong, but I know I'm not wrong. And I'm going to trust my vision and pursue it. You guys were being told by everybody this doesn't work. Usually, we listen to that voice.
Yes.
But you didn't. So what is that balance as a CEO, as a chief operating officer, as a GM to say, I'm not going to listen. I know I'm right, even though everyone's telling me I'm wrong.
Yeah, I look, the facts and circumstances are everything, right? And so I think there are those times where everyone is saying, hey, you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong, and you can't ignore that. I don't think we ignored what people were saying about our odds of success. But when we thought it through and we picked it apart, we weren't ignoring them. We just felt like we had very strong arguments for why that didn't apply. So the Galaxy are a great club, and they've had great success. And they got there a particular way, which is very different than our approach or the approach we intended to take and the way we intended to get there. With Chivas USA, they did a couple of things that we thought weren't the right way to go. One was they took the brand, the name, the colors, the whole thing from somewhere else. Right? In this town, that doesn't work. People from LA are about LA.
They're proud of the LA.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the notion of, this other, it's kind of like you're going to start a thing, you're going to start a baseball thing somewhere, and you're going to call it the Yankees. Well, what about everybody who doesn't like the Yankees?
Yeah.
And that became a problem for them because the other thing that they did,
because this wasn't just there's a big Mexican influence in LA, but they're not all Chivas Guadalajara fans.
And
Club America,
so
Monterrey,
basically,
Tigres.
They also took an approach that was very focused on that segment of the LA market. So they immediately shrunk this gigantic market to a subset, and then by taking the Chivas USA name brand colors, they took that subset and really shrunk it. Because it's like the Yankees. If you don't love Chivas Guadalajara, you probably hate them because you're an America fan, you're a Cruz Azul fan, you're a Club Leon fan, whatever. You have a rooting interest, and at some point you've bumped up against Chivas and you don't like them. And by the way, the last thing you're going to do is put on a jersey that looks exactly like it, right?
Yeah.
So that's how we landed on Unite the World City through the world's game. And that's a little spin on LA tourism's everybody's welcome here in the city of LA. Like, we wanted our stands, our fans, our staff, everything we did to be reflective of the community. And it should be all races, creeds, religions, sexual orientation, whatever. We were going to bring everybody together through this beautiful game. And we think we've done a pretty decent job.
Was there a marketing campaign that you remember pretty early on that really resonated, that you say, okay, this is whatever metrics you were using to measure the beat and the impressions, and okay, this thing's taken off just in the market prior to selling a ticket?
Our Crest launch video was about as on target as you could get, and we used it at the start of tours at our experience center when we didn't have a building.
I remember the experience center.
Right?
I was there at the beginning.
Yeah, and you'd walk in and you'd see this video, and it was about,
I think you have names or signatures or pictures of all the fans all over the wall before
Yeah. It was based on football being generational, being passed down, and being this shared experience, and bringing people together and being about this city. I think the combination of that narrative, those visuals, and then our crest, all credit to the people internally who worked on that, the folks that helped us externally. It's a thing of beauty.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And
the colors, everything.
And we saw, you asked about, a metric where, before we opened, we were like, we're kind of driving down the highway and you're seeing these signs, and it seems like maybe like we're on the right path, because the hat wasn't really a thing in global football. Scarves, kits, jerseys, but not the hat. Rich Orozco, our chief brand officer, got it in his mind, because we were off in, Dortmund, Germany. And you'd be walking down the street and you look across the street and you're like, that friggin' guy's wearing a Red Sox hat, or that guy's wearing a Dodger hat. Like, I'm 6,000 miles away or however far, and this guy's wearing that hat? Why? Because he thinks it's cool.
Yeah.
And so the idea was, you have the LA that comes out of our crest with the wing in it that you can throw on a hat, and it's the same size, 2 inches, as the LA and a Dodger hat. And we led the league in the sale of snapback hats on MLS Shop in 2017. We didn't play in 2017.
Right.
And so as a metric, you're like,
okay, we got
this
something.
can't be bad, right? And then, you started to experience in neighborhoods or on the streets in LA, if I'm in Ralph's in the frozen food and Chad is coming with his cart down the other way and he's wearing the hat, it's like, we're immediately brothers.
I remember that. Dapson grocery stores. That's not an exaggeration. I remember that really clearly. I was living in Orange County and had my LAFC hat because we were season ticket holders. And there was this connection point. Like, hey, we're part of this club.
Yeah.
During those early years, where were you ultimately? Where did you kind of land on, this is what Larry's going to do for us?
It was a hodgepodge. So I was overseeing the revenue. Somewhere in there, we had somebody with us who was overseeing the building and other events, and he moved on. I kind of over time was the answer, like, who's gonna do this now? It's like, all right, I'll do it and we'll figure it out later. And then it just ended up with me. It was a little bit of everything, from overseeing the stadium and events, overseeing the revenue. Then in the middle of COVID, our president left. He had started another business and went to pursue that full bore. And, John and I ended up as co-presidents, so I oversee all of the commercial stuff. So with that, I inherited finance, which, like, everybody's dream.
Yeah, 100%. There's a good career lesson in there, though, because I tend to find there are a lot of activities within organizations where there's not necessarily an owner of that project or that activity. And he or she who raises their hand and says, I'm willing to do it,
sure,
often is the one who gets to grow in their career faster.
Sure.
And that exists all the time,
yes.
right? Whether it be participate on a hiring committee, whether it be in a small organization who's going to oversee website design because nobody has marketing in their job title, to who's going to bring a podcast to life when there's not a podcast team, right? Like all of those activities.
Exactly.
Just a few examples, right? But that exists.
That podcast one was a really good example.
It's going to be excellent.
Yes.
So within any organization, you have opportunities to take responsibility and say, I'm going to go figure that out. And that sometimes turns into promotions, new roles, experiences on a resume that differentiate you from others with same job titles. Larry, over your right shoulder, there's an invisible pin with an invisible sticky note on it.
Yeah.
You said earlier, we always want to get better.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of organizations say that, just like a lot of organizations, especially in sport, exist to win championships.
Sure.
So the vision and the mission matter. Where there's no vision, the people perish. But it's not just vision and mission. It's actually the execution and operation of those. You guys are a championship organization, and you do continue to see revenue climb. Like what advice do you have for CEOs and senior leaders for how they actually put in place process and systems to say, are we getting better? Are we actually measuring ourselves to be champions?
Sure. We are always looking at how we're doing, and that takes many forms, right? How are we doing putting numbers on the board? How are we doing controlling the money we spend? How are we doing developing our people, right? And how are we doing as an organization where, we want LAFC to be a place that people want to work? When I was in the software business at Platinum Technology, I learned from a guy who was, like the ultimate cultivator of esprit de corps. It was not unusual in a company of 6,300 people in 43 countries to bump into somebody and meet them for the first time and say, Chad, how long have you been here? Oh, you've only been here for a couple of months. And the tagline would be, I've only been here a couple of months, but I've been trying to get a job here for like 3 years. And this was the fourth time I interviewed, and I finally got the job because I wanted to work here. So we want to be a place that people want to work because, among other things, if you're looking for more money in sports, you're probably not coming to MLS. So there has to be more in it for people. And we've always talked about our club being about soccer and more. And it's that community element, and it's what we're out there doing. And, we did an engagement survey at the end of last year, and we learned some things.
Everybody wants to work less and get paid more.
Well, that was a given. That was a given.
You go into it knowing that that's the answer.
Title, the bigger office.
So consistent themes in every company.
And I'm not sure when it happened, but now there's this perception that bigger title, more money means you work less. Like you just kind of kick back and do executive stuff, which I'm not sure.
Come up with good ideas.
I'm not sure where that came from because at least it's not the way it's working for me.
It's not working for you.
It's just an example. We do this engagement survey. We learn a couple things, and we take them seriously. We've been working with an executive coaching firm where some of us have been working individually, some groups. We've done multiple day trainings for leadership. Last week we broke the entire staff in half, and each half did a full day. So, and kind of a crash course on some of the key concepts so that the language is the same. So when we're talking about accountability, we all know what that means, and agreements versus expectations. And,
that's great.
How feedback is a gift, right? Like I give you feedback, Chad, because I care about you, not because I'm trying to make you feel bad.
Right.
And there's there's some tools and mechanisms to do that, so we leave that conversation feeling better.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I feel bad because I told you something you didn't love, and you feel bad because
you received
you
it.
didn't like it.
Yeah.
And we set out with some audacious goals across the board, whether they were about selling every ticket or the kind of revenue we were going to drive. You know, I think our partnership numbers would put us somewhere, you know, comfortably above the middle of the NBA, for example, which feels pretty good.
Yeah, it's great.
And the other events revenue we drive through the building, you know, Polestar had us 5th on the planet as an outdoor venue in concerts last year. So, you know, those things, but we also, you know, we need to care about the people and the experience the people are having, and we want to grow people. You know, we recognize where we sit in the food chain, and so when people move on, we celebrate that. We used to talk in Mandalay baseball, right? We had a bunch of people that had started for us and then that ended up being presidents of other teams or had moved on to Major League Baseball or big roles in other sports. And it's the same thing with LAFC. You know, we're really proud of our alumni, and we love it when they come back. And it actually is kind of, it feels good that so many of the folks that have moved on to do great things still, if they live here, come to games, or when they're here from out of town, find their way to BMO Stadium to a game. And, you know, one of the audacious goals we had in the beginning was, and I mean this with love and respect, you know, we're like, of course we want to be the best organization in MLS, but is that bar high enough? Probably not. We want to be the best organization in all of sports. Is that bar high enough? Probably not. And so we just said, like, whoever it is, if it's Google, you know, Twitter wasn't X yet, so Twitter, whoever it is, you know, we want to be in that conversation. Of course we want to be in the, you know, who's the best in MLS, who's the best in sports conversation. But we didn't want to stop there because we felt like that was kind of taking an easy way out. So, you know, whether it's the metrics, we need to grow our audience, we need to grow our fan base, our database, we need to improve the satisfaction ratings we're getting when we do a survey after every event we do in the building, whatever it is, you know, we're looking at it across the board, and we're trying to improve, you know, a little bit every day in everything we do.
So clearly you're looking at your own data, but then if you're trying to be the best employer in LA or in California or in sports, you're constantly looking at externally as well and saying, what's the best practice for XYZ?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. What would you, by the way, true testimony, 2 days ago, talking to a former employee who did end up making it to the NFL. And she recently came back, just popped in the office unexpectedly, and everyone was high-fiving and loving on her, and she had nothing but incredible things to say about you. So amazing culture. But you've won most innovative companies, best employer to work. How would you define some of these value characteristics internally? Like, you're looking at metrics, you want to win, but what are the values that undergird a lot of the winning?
I say things like, you know, you check your ego at the door, all the cliches. I like to string together the cliches, right?
Yeah.
You know, check your ego at the door, no job's too small, all hands on deck.
Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, let's keep going.
Too. Yeah. And look, I think we are trying to create a family environment where people really care about each other. If Chad is drowning, I don't just sit back and watch him drown. You know, I get in there and try and help him. And I think we try and foster that. We try and encourage intellectual curiosity, which is the, you know, it's right there with the raising your hand saying, hey, you know, there's that thing on the floor, nobody's picking it up. Is it cool if I pick it up? We love people who are curious and say, hey, I just want to know about what you do because I'm over here doing this. And I'd really be interested in learning more about what you do and what you do because I want to know how it all hangs together. And in that vein, we started last year, call it an executive leadership academy because, you develop players in an academy. We had people apply from all across the club, selected a handful of folks. They spent time on a weekly basis with me and with Stacy Johns, our COO, CFO. It was just like this great experiment where we were giving those folks, broader vision into everything we were doing. But as we rolled into it for the second year, we realized that an unexpected benefit was everything we got from those folks.
Yeah.
Which, I felt like, and I think Stacey would agree, we got as much from them as they got from us, which was fantastic.
We had so I go back 10 plus years when I wasn't working in sports. We had a client of ours that encouraged the language within their organization of constantly asking colleagues, what do you have to do to achieve your bonus this year? And they just wanted that to constantly be asked around the lunch table, around the office halls, and then to be followed up with, is there anything I can do to help you achieve your bonus this year? And part of it stirred that curiosity. But then they would sometimes have somebody in finance come up with a fabulous idea for the sales team because they now know where they can potentially add value. Ideas weren't just random scattershot. And it sounds like you guys are doing similar things within your organization to get empathy for each other's challenges, but at the same time to develop the talent base within the organization. So big kudos for that.
Yeah. There's nothing better. There's nothing better than the internal promotion. And we've had some wild ones, right? This is another thing that I love about our club is, a guy like Jeff Huber. Huber came to us, college soccer player, loves the game, was in medical equipment sales. Fearless, was used to selling things that cost a lot of money. So had no problem asking for significant checks from people and joined us because he wanted to be a part of it in ticket sales and probably put up close to half of the original ticket deposit.
Wow.
Sold an extraordinary number of tickets. Then the team starts coming out of the ground. We hired John, we hired Bob Bradley, we signed Carlos Vela. The role of team administrator gets posted. Huber raises his hand. Talk about a bizarre...
Right, ticket sales.
Right? To that, then we had a kid that we hired a couple of weeks before COVID hit, Oliver Curry. And Oliver joined in ticket sales and was one of the first people to start selling deposits in the middle of the pandemic. He's selling season ticket deposits over the phone. And you're like, this kid is something. A position with the team, and he had played soccer and, wanted to ultimately make a pivot similar to Jeff. And he ended up taking the number 2 spot with the equipment manager. And then the equipment manager left. And all in rapid, like everything with Oliver was like 2 weeks after. Like 2 weeks after he started in ticketing, the pandemic hit. Then a couple of weeks after he became the assistant equipment manager, the equipment manager was gone and he was man up. He recently left and joined Will Kuntz in a more player-oriented role at the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And so, it's these, we love those. And I also like a good Boomerang story, right?
Yeah.
So somebody who thinks maybe the grass is greener and goes and tries something and then, knock, knock. Hey, would you ever think of having me back? I love that. I love that because I think it says a lot about, what we've built, how we built it, what we're doing, how we approach it.
It gives them a chance to learn things they might not have learned within the organization. So I'm a dad. I've got a lot of kids. And
sure.
you set me up. You set me up right there.
Okay.
For a dad joke.
Okay.
What do you call a boomerang that doesn't come back to you? A stick. So that's all I got. That's all I got.
Okay.
One dad joke for the day. You set it up. It reminded me. I was so excited.
So they're going to edit that out?
No, that's going to have to stay.
Okay.
Wow. I'll wear it with ignominy every time I come back and listen to the episode.
Fantastic.
Larry, so a couple more questions for you. A lot of our audience are people 1 or 2 steps removed from your job today.
Sure.
What advice would you have for another C-level executive who's hoping to be a president, a CEO, for how they can get that opportunity and even to differentiate themselves in the interview room?
I go back to the intellectual curiosity, right? And I would also add a Peter Guberism, which is you have to be an active participant in your own rescue, right? You can't just sit and say, I'm a VP of ticket sales. I am a great VP of ticket sales, and somebody should call me.
Yeah, they're going to notice me and give me my break.
And I think, too, to the discussion we were having about taking those opportunities at a minimum to have the discussion and understand, what Chad is doing all day and how that fits and how what I am doing fits with what Chad is doing. But I think even more so is to try and volunteer, offer yourself up, help out, because you got to learn it.
Yeah.
You got to learn it because you can want to make the next step. And if what you want is to be the president, whether it's the president of, the Reno Aces in AAA baseball, or it's, president of the Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL, you're going to be overseeing all of it. In an interview, you're going to get asked about it.
Yeah.
You need to be at least conversant in it. And the only way to do that is to try and get in there and learn it in some form or fashion. I think most people are more than happy to accept help.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to help, people are not going to turn you down. I think you really have to go for it. You can't just sit back and wait for the phone to ring.
Right.
And expect that people are going to know you're sitting there waiting for the call.
Yeah.
And more than anything, you have to be ready.
Yeah.
You have to be ready.
How often are you having those conversations with your directs or even people lower about succession planning, career planning? What's your next step?
All as often as possible. I mean, I think we have a number of examples. Chad knows Stacey Johns, who's our COO, CFO.
She's awesome. She's great.
And a lot of what she's doing now came from a conversation where she point blank said, like, I want your job. And I think, and there's a couple of responses to that. One would be, well, maybe I better get you out of here because you're gunning for me. But, we then sort of set out on a path to get her more exposure to other parts of the business and more responsibility. As the CFO, she already had a lot of exposure because she was interacting with folks anyway.
Yeah.
And look, Travis Case, who's our VP of ticketing, has said, one day I want to be a team president.
Yeah.
And somebody verbalizes that. Now we know.
Yeah.
And now we can help with that.
Yeah.
Because not every VP of ticket sales, actually has that aspiration.
Totally. Totally.
Brendan Boyle, who was our VP of ticketing before Travis, was amazing. Great leader, super thoughtful, always came ready to play, but just was not interested. There were times where I would talk to him and say, hey, we're going to be doing this or that. You want to get in on that? And he'd be like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. And we also learned this in some of our trainings, safe space, man. Tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, what's the dream? Where are you? Where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? What's that dream? Because I can't help you get there if I don't know what it is. And you shouldn't be shy or embarrassed
right.
or feel guarded or that somehow, you tell me that you want to be a team president, that somehow now I'm threatened and I'm going to put you in a corner.
Yeah.
We try and foster that openness, like just lay it out there. Yeah.
Do people believe it the first time you tell them that that's what you actually stand for? Because a lot of organizations don't, and you could understand people thinking of past experiences, and viewing a new experience through a previous.
I think it's a question of how well do you know me? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because I think that there are people who know me well and have either been with me here for a while or with me somewhere else who know that, right? And you see this because, look, this is what you guys do. There are people who are deathly afraid of hiring someone who is better than they are. Mm-hmm. I will hire people that are better than I am all day long because ultimately, as a team, we drive the result. I'm judged by the result.
Right.
And I'm going to get the best result with the best people. And I've had people have worked for me who I can see it.
Yeah.
They are, no on the people that they would perceive as being as good or better than they are. And they're always trying to put forward as the best candidate somebody who, doesn't have the experience, doesn't check the boxes, kind of has no business getting the role, but it's a non-threat.
Sure.
So I think if somebody met me off the street or somebody who's only been in the organization for a short period of time might be less of a believer.
Right.
But I think the people that have been with me for a good minute know for sure.
Yeah.
That I'm not kidding.
What would you say your direct report, if we asked Stacy, hey, what does Larry obsess over in the business? What do you think she would say? Is it revenue? Is it developing people and culture? And where do you really thrive and really focus on?
Yeah, look, I stress trying to deliver the overall results for our owners. Our owners have invested an inordinate amount of money in this organization, in the stadium we built. They believed in the notion that spending more money on the stadium, building premium spaces, we would generate, we'd spend more to make more. That was a risk, and they took that risk. They've invested in the product on the field. They've invested in the people. I just take it super seriously, and it's somewhat magnified because we have 26 owners. So I feel, there's like this responsibility to all of them because it is all of their money. And two, we have such a great group and they're so proud of what we've done and what we've built, what we stand for, what we've done in the community. I think I obsess about not only, what's that net result and delivering that for them, but also I want to make sure that they continue to be proud of what we're doing and who we are and the product, whatever the product is, because, that's their expectation, right?
Yeah.
They all, it's funny. You have people like our lead managing owner, Bennett Rosenthal, who's a co-founder of Ares, one of the largest private equity firms on the planet, and has so many things in his life that he could talk to people about in a given moment, in a given conversation. And he's not alone. Larry Berg, Brandon Beck, Peter, like people gravitate to the LAFC thing because it's so much fun to bring their friends, their family who haven't been to BMO Stadium, haven't been to a match, haven't been to a concert, bring them there and show them and watch as they gaze in wild wonder because it's nothing like they expected.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you give to first-time CEOs? We just placed someone in their role, first-time CEO.
Sure.
So, and I can perceive that this will be happening more and more as new ownership groups come in, especially in the private equity space.
Sure.
What would you give advice to them?
I would say it's important to understand the expectations of the people you're working for, whether it's a single person or it's a group of people. You know, I've learned, and as part of this executive coaching stuff, it's very powerful. People live in this disconnect, and I'm guilty of it, of expectations, but they're not verbalized. And then when the expectations aren't met, you get so pissed. How could that have happened? Well, how could it have happened? You didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't say.
I didn't know.
Hey,
right.
This is what I want you to deliver, and this is how, and this is when. Do you understand that? Right? Or do we agree? And it's been interesting here because we have 3 co-managing owners, and they rotate. So it was one individual, then it's another individual, and then in some period of time it'll be another. You know, I think I've learned that, you know, you have to work on that relationship and really develop it and try and understand where everybody's coming from. And sometimes you have to, you know, be clear on your end about it as well.
Yeah.
So I think my advice would be not to shy away from, like, really, you know, at times perhaps uncomfortable conversations, but everybody's going to be better for it.
Yeah. Crystal clear on what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Larry, we've had fun. I hope you
Me
have as
too.
well. We're going to wrap up with a section we call the 7 Question Blitz.
It's like the 4 questions.
Yeah, it's only 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, we call it 7.
Okay.
And we ask everybody this.
Okay, sure.
Question number 1, softball for you. What sporting event have you never attended that would be on your bucket list?
I think I would like to go to a heavyweight championship fight. I grew up in an era where, you know, no ESPN, like, you got what you got. Wide world of sports kind
You're
of stuff.
saying like Holyfield, Tyson?
No.
type of
I'm
fight.
that's
talking like
pay-per-view.
I grew up on, you know, Ali, Frazier,
Yeah, I just mean
in that era.
boxing.
And so I think, and there's just a certain electricity goes with that. So I've never been in anything like that. So I think that would be pretty cool.
Nice. Take the next one.
What's your favorite podcast? What are you listening to right now? Favorite book, podcast?
Other than some of the LAFC fan podcasts, which like are a guilty pleasure, I just can't get away
Or
from
excellent
them.
leadership. You love
Yeah,
it.
well, this is new.
Yeah.
This is new. I am a fan of Talking the Sopranos podcast, which was Christopher Moltisanti and Bobby, you know, Michael Imperioli and Steve Sharippa went episode by
No
episode
way.
and peeled it apart. And there were a few on that show, Succession, too, where, you know, I watch these shows and I love them and I think they're awesome. And then I listen to these podcasts and I realize I had no idea what was actually going on because I was not, you know, really paying attention and picking it apart. So I really enjoy those kind of as a guilty, like, disconnect pleasure.
Yeah, that's helpful. What 3 people, living or historical, would you want to go golfing with?
There's a couple ways to answer this. So one would be sort of I've always been fascinated by Malcolm X from the time I was a kid and read all the books, the Alex Haley biography. I'm going to give you 2 sets of 3. One is Malcolm X, and then we're going to throw in Springsteen and Eddie Vedder, which, you know, just because.
That'd be a blast.
Yeah. And then I would say my 2 sons and my grandmother, because my grandmother didn't get to see them as grown men. And I think that would be pretty special.
Yeah. What was grandma like?
Amazing. Just amazing. Most influential person in my life, for sure. Yeah.
Why?
Spent a lot of time with her, saw the good in everybody, right? So a lot of life lessons in there. And when I went to college, my dad took a job first in Cincinnati, so moved out of Chicago, moved to San Francisco. And for the summers, I wanted to come home and hang out with my high school friends. So I would go back to Chicago, live with my grandmother. You know, watched a lot of professional wrestling together and had a hoot. So cool. Just a great lady. Great lady.
That's great. What's something most people don't know about you?
That in my job, I probably have missed more goals that have been scored at BMO Stadium than I have watched, because invariably I am in a back stairwell running from point A to point B to go find, you know, we have a partner that's there, we have a prospect that's there, we've got, you know, some other stakeholder that's there, and I'm, you know, on the roller skates trying to see everybody, you know, within the confines of pre-match and the match, and there's just the roar goes up.
What happened?
And you know what happened, and you try and find a television, you know, to see a highlight. So there you go.
That's a good segue. So what's the greatest sporting memory that you have?
So this is a tough one too. As a lifelong Chicago Cub fan who was, you know, led down the path countless times only to be brutally disappointed, and then pass that on to my sons, but in particular, my younger son has a Cubs podcast, by the way.
Your younger son has a Cubs podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, no way.
So we were at Game 5 at Wrigley Field against the Cleveland Indians in the 2016 World Series, which was pivotal.
One of the best series
because
ever.
they win to make it 3-2 to take it back to Cleveland. So being there with him was incredible, but it's impossible that anything other than another cup would beat winning MLS Cup on PKs at then Bank of California, now BMO Stadium. Stacey Johns and I were standing with Carrie Fleischer and Julie Ehrman from Angel City. And Christian Teo walks up to take the first PK and basically hands it to Andre Blake. And you're like, we tie it at the death, and now we're going to lose this way. And Julie and Carrie are just like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And I wanted to kill them. And yet they were right. And, and then, it was incredible.
What was your reaction? Jumping up and down, crying, hugging somebody, running around in circles?
So you do like the supporters and throw a whole bottle of beer in there?
Took off.
You ran?
Like I was shot out of a cannon from our owner's box to run down on the field.
Oh, that's so cool.
That was, and just that whole arc, basically nothing, like an agreement that the owners had spent $110 million to get expansion rights, nothing to that was just freaking amazing.
Replaying in your mind all the memories of getting from A to B.
The league and Apple TV did a 45-minute documentary that if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it, called A Cup Above the Rest, where they interview players, coaches, staff from both teams. And there's some nuggets in there that, had they not done that, I never would have heard, little anecdotal stuff. That's cool. Pretty amazing. It never gets old. It's like watching the Miracle on Ice and Eruzione score that goal, and Al Michaels ask, do you believe in miracles? Yes. You know how it's going to end, but you still get that feeling.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. You have to have one or two for me. Any professional pet peeves? When people do this at work, it irks you.
Sure.
Besides wearing handkerchiefs.
No, the handkerchiefs are
love those.
Pretty awesome. And especially the way they're very, very coordinated makes it great. I have a huge problem with people that are not timely in responding to phone call, email, text, WhatsApp, Slack, whatever it is, and then do the old, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
Because I have been with Peter Guber going on 2 decades. Peter Guber is in the movie business. He is a professor at UCLA. He is on the Board of Regents at the University of California. He is an active co-managing owner of the Golden State Warriors. He's our executive chairman at LAFC. He's in the ownership group at the Dodgers. He is involved in esports with Team Liquid and. Right. And that man has never taken more than 24 hours, usually less than 12, to respond, even if it is to say, I'm in Bali,
right,
and I'm not back until a week from Thursday. Call me a week from Friday morning.
Right.
So the notion that somebody
is too busy,
busier than Guber, to the point where they cannot be on top of their messages, just does not resonate with me.
So we asked this of a lot of people, and I was like, man, Chad, if you asked this to me, I don't know what I would say, but I think you just uncovered mine. That equally frustrates me.
I can tell you all the things that bothers Mark.
Yeah. Okay. Or you can tell me what bothers you about Mark.
Yeah.
Or that could be a separate pod.
We should do an episode. Should do an episode of both.
There we go. If you weren't in your current role,
sure,
and you could do anything on earth, your dream job, but it couldn't be another sports job,
sure,
what would it be?
I would like to think that I could write books like John Grisham. Like, that would be friggin' amazing.
That's cool.
Like, have a condo or a hut on the beach on Maui in Wailea and just crank out.
So it would be fiction books, not
written about attorneys primarily.
Whatever, man.
That's his books. I like his books.
Yeah.
That's great.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Sounds like Chad's. I think Chad's probably open a smoothie shop on the beach.
There you go.
Coffee shop, smoothie shop. I have to decide which one. Improv studio. I've got a few.
Okay.
These things will occur at some point.
Good deal.
Where should we eat tonight? We're in LA.
Favorite restaurant in the city?
Oh, well, so it's a little late for lunch. Dan's Super Subs in Woodland Hills. My cousin Elvis, like barbecue brisket. But I would say either Steak 48 in Beverly Hills, which the wait staff referred to as it's Mastro's 2.0.
Okay.
But I would say, you're in Texas now, go to Mastro's Ocean Club in Malibu and look at the water.
That's fair.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
If you're by the water, go look at the water.
Have a great steak.
And eat some steak and lobster or whatever. Yeah. But you're looking at the water.
Deal. I like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Larry, this is awesome. I feel like this is a good dress rehearsal. We're going to turn the cameras on. We're going to do it all again.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you. Amazing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
All right.
I was a first season ticket holder of LAFC.
I didn't know that.
Black and gold.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my daughter's first games are with the Hawk or Falcon. Forgive my lack of bird skills.
Ollie, 2 matches ago, I'm running around and I finally settle in and somebody turns to me and says, like, we have a falcon problem. And I'm like, what? And they're like, bird flew out of the building.
No.
Which is never, right?
No way.
Yeah.
The bird is trained with the lure.
It likes that spinning thing.
The lure. It's trained that you come to the lure, you get food.
Yeah.
And, she had done her thing, dive bombed, landed on the lure, got it, and left. Went out the southwest corner where, I don't know when the last time you were there, but there's the shipping container with the Ford truck on top.
Yeah, I know exactly where you are.
She went out, and it was kind of traumatic for people. Elizabeth Banks was the falconer, and she was like, oh my God, what did I do? The falcon didn't come back. And so they have a tracker on it, and they tracked it to the roof of a building across MLK and
just hanging out,
found their way in there. And
well, I was going to say, I noticed fewer pigeons this time in LA, so that explains
this
it.
is part of the idea is that because the family that cares for the falcons, that they have that business where they work at various properties, hotels, whatever, where they show up regularly with these birds of prey that show everybody else who's boss, and they tend to stay away.
I always love that. So Phoenix is an area where you see a lot of that. If you're staying at the Phoenician Hotel or the Biltmore, and there's always a falconer who's out there at the, and it's really fun to see because that's not a sight you see every day.
Which
unless you work at the Phoenician Hotel.
It's true. Yeah. So this all happens. Peter Guber had it in his mind that because we had that wing in the crest, right, that some kind of bird thing needed to be part of our ultimate branding. And he fixated on the California condor, right? Local.
Yeah.
Near extinction.
Yeah.
You know, endangered species.
Sure.
And then we all wake up one day and Steve Ballmer has unveiled Chucky Condor as the mascot of the Clippers, and did not get a warm reception. If you go back and look at what was written about Chucky Condor, and Peter was out of his mind. Like, he had our office bugged. He stole our idea. We are fucked. And John Thorrington, our GM at the time, now, you know, co-presidents with me. John's like, you got to see, I got an idea about a bird. You got to watch these videos, like on YouTube, National Geographic, and these birds are in the South Bay, and it's falcons. And it's all these videos of, you know, mama falcons seeing, you know, a snake going up the side of a hill to get to their nest and taking it out.
That's
and
so cool.
The project manager on our stadium build from Legends, Dave Hathaway, is like, well, you know, I'm kind of like a part-time farrier. I know all kinds of stuff about falcons. And he starts showing videos. He's like in the Middle East and he's flying these birds. And we're like, okay, wait, what?
Sounds more than part-time.
And then, yeah, right?
Part-time
and then,
weekends.
You know, he triangulates his way to Ken, who ends up being our falconer. And we get, you know, we acquire these birds and he raises the birds and it's generational. His son always helped him. Now his son has stepped into the lead role and Ken has stepped back. And all because Steve Ballmer, you know, stole Peter's idea.
And so Ollie never would have escaped if not for Steve Ballmer.
Exactly. It all goes back to Ballmer.
Right.